All right, so let's go to our next budget item then, monthly budget report. Tim, is your first one now.
I included in the report for you a narrative about the financials for the 12 months ended June 30th, as well as a financial report that I used to do in the previous district, and then also included is all of the financial statements that come directly out of the DCR software that we have. But I tried to highlight in the narrative where we were at in relationship to budget. On the revenue side, we were 1.4 million over budget. The majority of that comes from a transfer of working cash. We transferred $600,000 from the working cash fund to the education fund. So that amount of money is an expense to the working cash fund, and it's a revenue to the education fund. So on the revenue side, we have $600,000 in additional revenue in the ed fund that came from working cash. And then on the expenditure side, we have an additional $600,000 in expenditures into working cash fund. Neither one of those line items were budgeted. So that's where the primary difference is between the actual revenue and expense for the year and the budgeted numbers.
My question to you is on revenue side, are there any state monies owed to us, or what is that amount that was not paid for the fiscal year that we just ended?
I think if it was, it would be minor, simply because the majority of our revenue comes from property taxes,
okay,
and that's not coming through the state.
And then looking at these over revenue sources, any concerns? Are you reviewing it just to make sure we're right on where we need to be?
Yeah, no, I think they're probably, you know, they were estimates in terms of what the revenue budget was going to be for those items, and they just came in more.
Okay.
Some of that, the special ed and transportation reimbursements, may have had to do with how the state is paying the bills, because that's money that came from the state.
And then our operating fund balance on June 30th is 23.2. In our budget, what do we have it at?
I think the goal in the budget was 20%, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know exactly what the budgeted amount was.
Okay. Any questions for Tim on the budget?
Yeah, I've got some. I'm still learning this.
Sure.
So you're basically saying with the 1.8 million decrease and the total operating fund balances, that's basically what our deficit was?
Yes.
$1.8 million.
Who you had, John?
The last sentence under the budget report.
Okay.
So what was our budgeted deficit then?
2.7 million.
So the budgeted deficit was 2.7 million. That's basically from our budget that we approved.
Right.
And we came in at 1.8. So we saved 0.9.
900, yeah.
So where did all that savings come from, essentially? We saved $1 million.
Well, about $500,000 of it came from those three items that I highlighted on the revenue side, but we were over budget.
At the top?
Yes.
Okay.
So to be clear, working capital balance is not included in the operational fund balance. Is that correct?
Working capital balance?
Yeah. So we took the 600,000.
Working cash.
Working cash.
It is an operational fund,
It's an operating fund. Yes.
so it would be in the balance.
Right.
If you
So
flip to the next page, it might help
second page,
clarify
right.
for Tim.
The operating funds are basically the funds that we control. We kind of take debt service out of that because we have no control over debt service. The county levies the taxes that are needed in that account, and then when the bills come,
Right.
we make the payments. So those are the funds that we control, and one of those is working cash. And actually, the third page shows working cash balance at the end of the year, $5.3 million.
Because we're showing 9.7 versus 8.2.
Where you at? What page?
No, the debt service is tough.
Right, the debt service is in there.
It shouldn't be, if
Right.
you're looking at it that way.
Right. I think an easier breakdown is on page 2, when I went through this with Tim. So if you look at the expenditures in the Excel spreadsheet, working cash, we had
What
zero.
page are you on, Kevin?
Page 2 of the Excel spreadsheet. Right after Tim's,
Flip your page back, right there.
so you're on it, John. So if you look at, we had nothing budgeted in that working cash, and then we spent 600,000, and that 600,000 is also showed as a revenue in the ed fund. in the revenue side. So it makes it look like we were over budgeted by 921,000 in the ed fund, but really we were only over by about 320 because 600,000 of that was borrowed money.
Correct.
Well, because you borrow money, that doesn't offset that you're over budget, just a way of paying for it.
Right.
You were 900,000 over your budget, right?
Well, we didn't have anything in the expenditure column, right, Tim, for the working cash last fiscal year?
Correct.
So if I was to pull the 6 out of the revenue and the 6 out of the expenditure,
You'd still come with the same profit loss.
It'd be the
Yeah,
same
the difference would be the
differential,
same.
but I'm looking at revenues then of 800, and I'm looking at, I'm sorry, yeah, 800,
Right.
and I'm looking at expenditures
but 100.
of 100 negative,
Right.
right?
Yes. Yeah, and this report is just some, I mean, I put this together, if there's something, you know, you want changed on this, if this isn't explicit enough.
Well,
can
I
make
sent you
any
a
changes.
very nice long email about it. And either you guys have an opportunity to respond to my email, or I'm going to ask the same questions I put into it.
No, I think we were going to forward that to the finance committee to have them
Right.
start working on it.
Well, again, I have a fundamental problem with the way things are being, this is the way we got the stuff last month. Now, you're new, it's a new report, but there's all kinds of information on this that isn't on here at all. And as John and Gary are pointing out, we're at a 1.8 million deficit, which it doesn't say here anywhere. And not only that, it doesn't even have that number in either of the reports that are supporting the item, and the 3 items that you list as explaining part, like 500,000 of a 1.4 million change, aren't even listed on the items in here. And then the third one here, where we're trying to figure it out, we've got the debt service right in the same list as the operating. And, you know, again, it's like, I mean, I feel like it's 52 card pickup sometimes when we're getting these reports.
The reports that you're getting behind where it starts with the summary of fund balance and then all of the detailer, those are reports that come out of DCR.
I understand that.
I can't change those. Okay. What I was trying to do is provide a report, the financial report with revenue and expenditures was just to provide showing the difference between budget and actual. As I say, I can change any of this on this report that you want. I can add anything, I can go back to the report you got previously, but we can't change
Page 3
the
on
rest of it. Yeah, those are just standard reports that come from the software.
Well, I mean, if it's worth reporting that there's a $1.8 million decrease, it's worth showing it on the report so that when we read it, we can see where is it on the report. It's not on the report anywhere. So then we have to, you know, either do the math, which apparently some of us did, which takes a lot of time, or we could have a report that actually shows the information that's worth reporting.
Well, he does say in his report, there's a 1.8 million decrease from the beginning of the year.
I understand that, but then I'd like to go to the report and say, well, where is that number? And it's not.
So but what I'm looking at in the operating is that we had budgeted 2.8 deficit spending. We wound up deficit spending 1.9, the $900,000 variance, of which it appears 300 is coming out of the education and 300 is coming out of the building is the major drivers in revenue side. And then on the education side, on the expenditure side, is that we saved 300,000, the major drivers. Now, we can look into see on the education, I thought it was primarily due to the prior levies that we had budgeted $650,000 of monies having to go back on what is it, abatement?
Yes.
And we didn't
Yeah.
incur that kind of cost to the tune of 200, is it? Something to that
I think
tune?
one of the funds that was budgeted at 215, it came in at 65, so.
And then what was the education one,
Yeah,
which is the big one, right? 650, and we came in at 216.
right.
So 400,000 of it is the fact that we didn't get the
The real estate tax. right?
real estate
Didn't have
tax
that.
of abatement, right? The
Yes.
prior ones. That's the primary driver on the revenue side, right?
Yes.
Gary, where is that at?
It's on page 1 of the revenues, education fund.
Be the first page with lots of detail, right there. Third
The
line.
third
item.
line item down.
It's also on here.
Going forward, since we can pretty much only control Tim's cover page and the Excel sheet, that was in the email Mr. Walsh I sent back to that said, hearing the feedback tonight from your email, I asked him to save that email and share it with the finance committee so that at least the cover page and the Excel sheet that he can control, we generate some consistent reports so that the board can understand it and we follow that format from this point forward for all board meetings.
And then is the building one primarily a big driver? Is it the insurance rebate? And I wasn't around at the beginning, but did insurance funds come in this year?
We had insurance claims.
For the reason why.
Where you at, what page you're at?
Well, I was looking at the building revenue stream. We were positive 300,
What page are you?
40, which is back to the summary page.
So,
Page 2 of the Excel sheet.
what are you referring to as building, the bond and construction?
Isn't the third item revenue
Okay,
building?
that one.
20
all right.
operating and
Uh,
maintenance. Well, personal property replacement tax was a big item, that was $100,000,
And then the other income line,
correct.
other local revenue, what was in there?
Um,
Which is 200,000.
That I'd have to go in and look up the
Yeah,
detail on, I don't know.
So, I mean, those are, in a real summarized form, those are the kind.
So Tim, if you can just work to restate this a little bit maybe, just so
Okay.
we have a clearer picture.
Why was the debt service almost 300,000, the revenue up almost $300,000?
It has to do with the amount of the payments that are coming due December 1st, because you're making your principal and interest payments on December 1st. So you're
So it's a-
generating enough money in tax revenue to make those payments.
And the last thing I have, and again, you're going to talk to the finance committee, that's fine, or we're going to talk about it in the budget, but I'd like to know, before we approve the budget, maybe when you do it, is how do the principal and the department heads and the athletic director know what the budget is for their line items, and how do you control them staying within it? I mean, and I highlighted them all for you, there's tons of lines items where we're over budget, on stipends and all kinds of other things. So the obvious question to me is, who's looking at this, and before we expend money, saying, well, wait, we only budgeted 10,000, we can't buy more software, or we can't buy something, or whatever it is.
Well, the software package that we have controls, like if you're putting through requisitions to buy supplies, if you want to purchase services, it controls it so that you can't enter a requisition unless there's money in the budget for that. So theoretically, those line items can't go over budget unless they're approved by somebody to go over. Certain things like repairs, if you have to make repairs, you're probably going to go over budget because you're not going to not repair things because you've hit a budget line item. Or out of district tuition, if you have more students that have special education needs out of district and your tuition expenses are going to be higher, you obviously are going to have to spend that money, and if you have to go over budget, you're going to have to go over budget.
So Tim, as you've taken over the finance responsibilities here, what is your game plan going forward to make sure that we're on budget, not over budget? What are you?
Well, with regard to the discretionary types of things like department budgets and things like that, those are items that are going to get to budget and then they're going to stop. And they're only going to go over budget, unless there's a discussion with Dr. Skinkis about it and it's approved.
Well, this give me one example, because, and maybe you want time to think, we're doing the same thing to you, although I sent you the email. If you look on page 13, about 10 line items down, it says certified salaries. The budget was 0, and we spent $178,000. Now, your explanation how the system stops it doesn't explain, how do we go $108,000 over something that wasn't even budgeted?
That's salary.
I-
So that's not going to, the system that's going to stop is when you're entering purchase orders. So if you're purchasing supplies, you're purchasing services, you're trying to enter requisitions. If you're talking about the salaries, those are just going into these accounts when the payroll is generated.
I mean, then there's a stipend about 8 lines down, we were 50,000 over budget.
But if you look at, Tim, could it be a reclass, or it could be?
I don't know.
If I add up the certified salaries, it more than covers that $107,000. And even if you take the negatives out of it, I think you're pretty close to on budget there. I don't have the calculator with me, add it up. So right now, I got 3 accounts that show 100, 118.
Well, again, maybe you want time to think about it, but
Yeah.
that's I have a big concern when I see all kinds of items that are weren't budgeted for, or over budget. And well, here, I'll do one you can't explain. On 18, on software, it's about middle. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of software, and we budgeted about, I added up when I sent you the email, but $5,300, and we spent $29,000.
But here,
And I'm not sure if this answers that question. There were some things that we had
Hey,
budgeted through the
Listen.
American Reinvestment Act, that the money hadn't come through, that we had to pay the money and wait for that to come through, and I don't know if that's one of them, but some of those were software.
You're talking about the software?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We raised that issue last bill payment. It's the Read 180, $19,000. And wasn't there a offsetting grant? And that is the question I have to ask, is what line item does that grant show up on?
Exactly.
That's the question I have to ask.
That, there is something to offset that, and I know we had to pay it out before the money came
So it
through
may
by
come
the
in,
state.
revenue may come in next year's budget. Is that how it works? Because we had raised that in the bill payment last time through, because I was questioning the 19,000, but somebody had said that there was an offset to this Read 180.
Yes, I believe that.
But I didn't know where the
But
revenue
you
is.
might, were you talking about that? We were talking about the Read 180 today.
Well, there are revenue line items, especially with grants, where you are receiving the money after the end of the fiscal year, so they're not included.
So they're going to
on
come
these
into the
reports.
next year's budget?
Correct.
Okay.
But my fundamental thing is, somebody's got to explain, and again, in order to be able to answer what Gary said, then you got to have the budget also laid out by account or whatever with the revenues and the expenses, so you know that you have this much revenue budget, this much expense. If the revenue doesn't come in, then you can't spend it unless somebody's, and again.
But wouldn't you do that as an accounting function? Like, okay, here's a perfect example. When we were doing the building, Commonwealth Edison came to us and said, you need to pay $240,000 upfront for us to upgrade your power. Am I right, Tim? To upgrade the power coming in the building because you're adding all this stuff on. So we had to pay that upfront, but what they did was they said, we're going to rebate it back to you over a 10-year period of $24,000. So in that situation, we paid it upfront, sent it up as like a receivable or even annuity where we come out from there. So and tell me if I'm wrong on this one, Tim, on that type of situation where we have grant money coming in, it's going to be a receivable of monies coming against it. Am I right? They'll close out a payable.
Well, and grant money on all federal grants, you used to be able to set up payment schedules where you could say we want so much every month. Now they've changed that so that now grant money that comes in is based on the expenditure reports you turn in. So you have to spend the money first before the federal government will give you the money. So they're reimbursing you for that money.
Okay.
So if you write in your Title I grant, for example, that you're going to spend $50,000 on supplies, you have to show them that you spent $50,000 on supplies or capital or whatever before they're going to give you the money.
Okay. Any other questions for Tim?
Yeah, I do want to kind of follow that up, because when we look at, if we see negatives, I mean, it's not hard for us to say that the explanation you gave us is not working. Because this, before you cut me off, please, you've already spent this money, and now we're in hindsight approving it, but it's already been spent. And so what we should be getting is an explanation of the variance. I mean, when we look at page 27, you had budgeted $1,000 for paid services. You spent $1,492. You already spent it, and we have to approve it. We say, no, where's that going to come from? So there should be an explanation. There's a negative $492, but there's no explanation of that variance, why we didn't budget enough, and as has been asked in the past, what controls are there so that we don't end up with a $500 deficit? Here's on page 43 on building, the fund 60, I believe that's our building fund code.
Yep.
In the middle, you budgeted nothing. We spent year-to-date $4,000. So we're in the hole $4,000. Who approved that? Where's the explanation of variance for that?
But Laura, if you look at the whole total budget, you have a lot of accounts here, you can't do a specific accounts.
They
You gotta
should
look
be-
at grouping of, you have to look at groupings of accounts.
No.
To be able to say that.
I would suggest in
They should
our
be budgeted.
retreat,
Yeah.
we agree to a threshold of variances.
Yes.
That will have to be documented out and give Tim, because we could be here going to $200
I agree.
to 25,000. We come to an agreement, we're bombarding you guys for first meeting, but that's probably the thing, kind of question we'll be looking at. But maybe we can come to an agreed threshold of what
Before we decide what
variances.
we're gonna do this year, I'd like somebody to tell us, what did we do all I wanna know is, do you have some policy and procedure, and how do you do it?
Well, Tim, this is his 4th day and this is my 8th day, so we're trying to establish some of that stuff.
Art and Pam approve payments, don't they?
On athletics, we are not over budget. If each team has, let's say, 4 line items, supplies, dues and fees, whatever, if you happen to go over by $200, then we take that out of dues and fees so that your bottom budget is not over. We did not go over budget on one single athletic thing.
I'm not challenging.
No,
You're
but
missing
that's-
I don't want you to explain, I want somebody to just tell me, what's the policy, what's the practice, so that going into Gary's, if you have a policy that says if it's the variance is 1,000 or less, that you can just approve it, I'm okay with that.
Pam,
If it's
has there been
10,000,
any
the
policy?
principal has to do it, I'm okay with that. I just want to know.
All right,
How
so
do
the
you do
finance
it?
committee, that's one of the items that you're gonna be talking about.
Yeah,
all
we
right?
just need a reporting protocol,
I agree.
because we have a 383% increase in something called professional services under building. And we'd kind of like to know what it is, because that's a big whopping amount of money. It was $57,000, and it was budgeted for $15,000.
Okay, so
Don't know.
let the finance committee look at policy-wise where we're gonna be at and where we're gonna be variance.
But here's a question. Pam has been here more than a year. Have you had a policy in place in the past year?
I've not seen a formal policy, but usually when, if something went to Chris as a request to go over, something that was over budget, I think that he usually got permission from the superintendent. If it was instructional, he would ask me what the reason was. For instance, it could have been a student who came in and transferred in with an IEP who has particular needs, purchase services. That sometimes what happens with that is that those are people that are itinerant workers who come in and they're working on speech and language, or there might be something along that line. We had many more students with the vision and hearing that needed to be retested that we didn't anticipate. So those kinds of things sometimes happen, and then it would come to my attention, and I would go and talk to the superintendent and say, this is what happened, and this is why we need this, or whatever. But not everything you're talking about I'd probably be aware of. I'd
So
be
are
aware
you
of
telling
some
me
of
they
them.
were approved on a case-by-case basis?
Case-by-case basis, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, there may
So I
be a
need to know.
rationale for this, too. We
Yeah.
just don't know.
Yeah.
We look at this, and a bunch of red flags go up.
All right, so,
I can
and
see
if
that.
you have any additional items you want to have looked at the budget, I mean, format-wise or anything else, send it to Kevin and he can bring it up with the finance committee.
Well,
Right.
this is our meeting, President City, and this is where we talk and we learn what's
I
going on.
agree, and that's why I
So right
said-
now, part of what we will bring to, right now, there's a practice that expenses are approved case by case. Now, we can think about that, and when we go into retreat, we may want to revisit that practice.
But what I'm saying right now is the finance committee, which is working with the superintendent, would be able to look at that and address it for you right away to see if there is an issue with it that needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
Let me also
That's what
make a
I'm saying.
suggestion, if the advisory finance committee is going to meet with the superintendent, maybe they could send an
Answer.
email and ask, is there questions from other committee members that they would bring forward?
Well, and I
He
think
already
that.
sent one.
Mr.
Yeah, he already
Walsh sent them
sent
and
one.
we
It's got
already,
50 questions.
Yeah, he's already sent 50 questions.
and we already sent that to the finance committee meeting to
Yeah.
review.
So what I'm saying right now is, it's, be proactive.
Yeah, he
You
sent
know-
them, but I didn't know that I had opportunity to also send these questions. You sent the that would have been nice. It might have been nice to, if you would have shared, finance committee will be meeting in the next week. Does anybody have questions that you'd like that advisory group to think about?
How about I do this, Laura, for you? How about I do this? When Kevin sets up a committee meeting, he will send out to the board members that the committee meeting's happening. If you have any other questions or items that need to be addressed by the committee. Will that work?
That's good.
Gary, do you
Will that
think
work
that's a
with
good
you?
idea?
Will that work with you?
Yeah,
Will that work with you, Gary?
definitely, definitely.
Okay.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next one is FOIA request. We have 2 FOIA requests from the Chicago Tribune that we responded to on June 15th, and then from
This meeting.
Ms. Chazinski, Proven Business Systems, we responded to on June 20th. Okay?
Kevin, could you follow up on my question on that?
Yeah, Mary Ann sent your response to it.
We okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, and now we're moving up to our first thing, first point for visitors to the state to come up and speak. I asked you if you move that mouse, but I'm going to start over here first. Anybody want to speak? Bob, do you want to speak? Or? All right. Anybody on this side?
Is it still?
Okay, seeing nobody, about anybody on this side?